Areas of North Carolina hit hard by Hurricane Helene began a huge cleanup and recovery effort on Sunday. The storm has plowed through the southeastern United States over the past several days, destroying roads and bridges, knocking out power for millions, and causing massive flooding from Florida to Virginia. A Reuters tally of state and local officials Sunday evening put the death toll from the storm at least 90 people, with officials afraid more bodies would be discovered. Video from Friday showed streets in the picturesque city of Asheville submerged in floodwater. 30 people died in this county alone, according to the sheriff. Governor Roy Cooper called the storm, quote, a devastating catastrophe of historic proportions, and said search and rescue teams from 19 states and the U.S. government had converged on the state. George Carter was among those Reuters spoke to on Sunday, still reeling from the storm.
When you turn the corner and you see your community just full of buildings and trash and floating boathouses and floating homes, it just sort of takes your breath away. And it was scary.
Property damage and lost economic output will become clearer as officials assess the destruction. But over the weekend, insurers and forecasters said damage estimates range from $15 to more than $100 billion. A U.S. Energy Department official said roughly 2.7 million customers throughout the South were without power on Sunday. In Flat Rock, North Carolina, there were widespread blackouts, and people waited hours in line for gas after the storm caused disruptions to fuel supplies.
When you can't get gasoline, you can't go anywhere. You can't go buy nothing. Of course, there's nothing open right now, but it all depends on these gas stations. You're not going to be able to go nowhere. And it's just a scary feeling.
The White House said President Joe Biden and Vice President and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris plan to visit affected areas this week, once they can do so without impeding the response effort. The campaign of Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump said he would visit Georgia on Monday to receive a briefing on storm damage and, quote, facilitate the distribution of relief supplies.
Investors hit the brakes on Stellantis Monday. Shares in the car giant fell around 14% after it slashed annual forecasts and warned it would burn through more cash than expected. Stellantis blamed higher costs to overhaul its US business and Chinese competition on electric vehicles. The Peugeot and Jeep owner isn't the only major European car maker to warn on profits recently. It joins rival Volkswagen, which cut its annual outlook for the second time in 3 months days ago, while BMW and Mercedes have also lowered their outlooks. The downgrades come as the European Union finalises plans over possible tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Stellantis said it was dropping expectations for positive free cash flow. It now expects to burn through up to almost $11.2 billion in cash this year. The company said it sees adjusted operating profit margin of 5.5% to 7% this year. That's mostly due to its decision to speed up the normalisation of inventory levels in the US. The carmaker also said operating profit margin would be hit by lower than expected sales in the second half of this year across most regions.
It was still raining and the soil was sliding. People came out crying. I don't know if anyone was buried. They say that people were coming from work when the landslide happened. People were crying. They were terrified by the landslide. The civil protection came. But if it rains, another landslide may happen.
Hopes of finding dozens of migrants missing after their boats sank off the Canary Islands were diminishing, authorities said on Sunday, in what could be the deadliest migrant crossing incident from Africa to the Canaries in decades. Patrol boats and helicopters continued a second day of search near the Spanish island of El Hierro after emergency services received a distress call from the boat in the early hours of Saturday. They said wind and poor visibility made the rescue extremely difficult and that the boat sank during the rescue attempt. Rescuers were able to pick up 27 of 84 migrants from the boat, but at least 9 people died in the incident, authorities said, including a child. Candelaria Delgado, who heads up the Canary Islands Regional Social Welfare Department, said minors who have arrived are at a temporary reception centre. She urged the Spanish government to activate a mechanism with the European Union that would allow minors to be transferred to other parts of the continent, saying the island needed help tackling the humanitarian crisis. Bracing for the expected fate for those still missing, Delgado said it would make this incident the biggest crisis the Canaries have experienced in 30 years. Data from the EU's border agency Frontex showed that the route from Africa to the islands has seen a surge in migrants this year, with more than 21,000 crossing in the first 7 months. 3 other boats reached the Canary Islands on Saturday night, carrying more than 200 migrants.
Austrian voters handed a first-ever general election victory to the far-right Freedom Party on Sunday. Their victory is the latest sign of rising support for hard-right parties in Europe that appears to be fueled by anxiety over immigration. The Eurosceptic Russia-friendly party won nearly 29% of the vote, according to a projection by pollster Foresight late Sunday. Leader Herbert Kickl spoke after the record showing.
And you don't need to worry, this 29% is well invested. It's an excellent investment for the Freedom Party because one thing has happened today. We have actually opened this door. We have opened the door to a new era. We are now really going to write this new chapter in Austrian history together.
A win for the Freedom Party, or FPO, comes 7 decades after its founding under a lawmaker who was a former Nazi. The party has worked to moderate its image, but Kickl remains a provocative and polarizing figure, disliked by other party leaders. They immediately united in rejecting the notion of forming a coalition with him, raising the risk of his victory being a hollow one. A few dozen anti-FPO protesters assembled outside the party's election celebrations late on Sunday as police kept them at bay. The FPO wants to stop granting asylum altogether and build a, quote, fortress Austria, preventing migrants from entering. Kickl also opposes providing aid to Ukraine and wants sanctions against Russia withdrawn. The FPO has faced backlash from other parties because of its criticism of the EU and failure to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. President Alexander von der Bellen, who oversees the formation of governments, urged parties to find common ground in negotiations in the coming weeks. If Kickl cannot persuade another party to ally with him, it could end the FPO's hopes of forming a government and open the door to a coalition of more moderate parties.
केटा लिए तामल केटा निकाल्नु